help you with your temperament. We have Reverend Paul Douglas Walfall with us right now. Good morning.
Morning, morning.
How are you doing?
Pretty good for my age.
Should we ask what that
no,
is
that's
now?
governed by the State Secrets Act.
Well, he started it.
No, we're going to have to be killed if you tell us.
Incarceration, totally.
Yes, keep
Okay.
it to yourself, Reverend.
So we can't do that then.
No.
So we're looking at 250 years of Methodism. Is that in the Caribbean or is it that
In the Caribbean and the Americas, yes.
In Caribbean and the Americas,
Yes.
250 years.
250 years. The Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas extends from Belize in the west, right across to Barbados, Bahamas down to Guyana, including Haiti, Panama, Costa Rica, Guadeloupe, and we're also in Europe, believe it or not, in Holland,
Yeah.
Nice.
covering at least 30 nations.
How did that happen? Americas and Holland.
You sure you have the time? But everything got started really in 1760 when a planter in Antigua by the name of Nathaniel Gilbert. He had gone to Britain the year before, met with John Wesley, heard John Wesley preach, and was converted, and therefore came back to Antigua. And coming back to Antigua, he started to preach to his slaves. This is significant because this was a layperson. This was not an ordained individual. And having come back now to the Antigua and preaching, you find that this is the first movement of Methodism outside of Britain. So in the Caribbean and the Americas, we rightfully celebrate that we are the first place outside of Britain that Methodism extended to. From that point, things just took off. It just mushroomed and blossomed throughout the Caribbean, largely through the work of lay people. The history of the Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas is indebted a lot to the laity, and more so to the lay ladies, lay women. They were the backbone and still are the backbone of our church today.
Okay.
In terms of a little bit of a historical perspective, I get the impression it was started by John Wesley and his brother.
Yes, in England.
Was it called Methodism at the time?
Well, the Methodist movement began within the Anglican Church. John Wesley's hope was to be a community within the larger Anglican Church. So in order to be a part of the Methodist community, you had to be first Anglican. And the arrangement in Britain at one point was that you would have gone to Mass in the morning and then to the Methodist Society meeting afterwards. Certain, let's say, political issues occurred after Wesley's death. And the Methodist Church, therefore, was born. The interesting thing to note is that John Wesley would, if he were alive today, would say that it was not his intention to form a church. However, the Methodist Church still came into being.
Okay. So with all that rich history, how are you going to celebrate this 250th anniversary?
Well, the celebrations began from January throughout the Caribbean and the Americas. I'm here speaking of the overall celebrations, the celebrations that will be specific to Barbados. No doubt the Barbados planning people will come in to speak about that at another time. We started in January with a time of prayer. Prayer as a faith community is important. And from that time of prayer, we went into having our special conference in May, and many things happened. But there are other things coming into the 250th anniversary as a whole Caribbean. One of the things, in 2006, the church made the decision to appoint a full-time publishing officer in the person of yours truly. And this year, for 250th anniversary, quite a number of publications are coming out, which will, I think, move us from simply being a missionary outpost to being a church proper. Number one, by the end of this year, we will have a new hymn book. Now, you have to understand that the current Methodist hymn book was published in 1933. And one of the things I keep on saying to people is that I know of very few publications published in 1933 that still have currency.
That's true.
Today. But the Methodist hymn book is still a strong and vibrant part of our faith experience as a people called Methodists. But we are moving now to have a Caribbean Methodist hymn book, not a hymn book published in Britain for Britain and its overseas dependencies, but a hymn book which reflects the rich cultural Caribbean experience. Granted, the current 1933 hymn book has 900 plus hymns. And in today's world, to produce a hymn book with 900 and odd hymns would be a little more than the average publisher would want to take on. So a majority of our hymns in the new hymn book will be from the 1933 edition, but we're adding to that some modern hymns and some of the hymns from the Caribbean. The unique thing about the Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas is that if you take the whole connection, as we call it, there are 6 languages spoken in this one connection. And so we want also to include that linguistic diversity within our hymn book as well.
Music styles also?
Music styles as well. Because you see, one of the things the Caribbean is blessed with is diversity. You can move from hearing somebody singing in the classics down to going down by Queen's Park and seeing people in Calypso. You go around the corner and hear the reggae. And I'm one of those who contend that music is a creation of God. It's what you do with the music that's the problem. So all of these will be involved in our hymn book as well.
Well, you started off by saying, you know, the age of the publication, and then you talk about publishing a new hymn, and I was getting a little worried because, you know, but then you said a lot of them are going to be the old hymns, because when I was growing up, my great aunt always sang some Wesleys.
Yes, very good.
So I was saying, if you were going to be doing a new hymn book for Methodists and it didn't have those Wesley classics, you might have a riot.
But that's the truth, you know, because one of the things I've constantly been reminding my superiors is that the 1933 edition is more than simply a hymn book. It's an institution in itself, and many persons who are Methodists define themselves by this hymn book. You know, I'm Methodist because I use the Methodist hymn book. But the other reality is that what is worship? Worship is the offering of the people unto God. And since 1933, quite a number of good, sound, theological, and otherwise hymns have been written. And we must find a place in the economy of the sun somewhere to allow this to be included. And one of the things you have to recognize, keep on saying, as I said before, was that Caribbean is about diversity. So yes, I'm not jettisoning the and can it be and the
you can't jettison that.
No, you can't. You know, people just have a coronary and die.
Yes, we don't want that.
But we're including. We're saying, hey, and can it be the 4,000 tongues to God be to the glory are all important, but we must also include the other hymns that have been written since then, which are equally sound and equally reflect the diversity, the spiritual journey of the people of God in the Caribbean and the Americas.
You say they're equally sound?
They're equally sound.
Yeah, okay.
Trust me, well, if we in the Caribbean have trained our ministers properly, that they can stand up in pulpits on Sunday morning and preach theologically sound sermons, then I would trust that they can also edit hymns to say whether or not they are good, sound hymns. I think it's about us as a Caribbean people trusting ourselves and recognize that we have something to offer.
So it's not about tearing down the institution, it's more about strengthening it?
It's about strengthening it. It's about saying, and I want to emphasize, it's about saying in the process that we in the Caribbean, we have something to offer. We can worship God as well. We don't need necessarily to be borrowing from others. We have something we can put on the table, which is equally important to worship God.
I like that.
Some people will tell him, but that is ours. We'll talk some more about that. Hold on, Reverend. We'll talk some more about that after.
Yes, we were going to give you a nice tip. Of course, we're going to get back with the Reverend, because 250 years, we can't just cram that into a few minutes. If you are on the telephone, acknowledge the